Visions so intense, voices so real, experiences so shattering that he wrote, "I was menaced by a psychosis." He saw things that would have led to institutionalization for anyone else. Floods of blood over Europe, the dead walking. Conversations with figures from depths of the psyche most people never touch. His family thought he'd lost it. His colleagues abandoned him. He nearly lost everything. But what he found in that darkness became the map that could save your life. Not your spiritual life, your actual psychological survival. Because here's what Jung discovered that changes everything. Spiritual awakening isn't what the gurus sell you. It's not ascending to light. It's not transcending your humanity. It's not becoming peaceful, enlightened, or special. It's the systematic destruction of every lie you've used to stay sane. Jung saw it clearly. Humans need illusions to function. We need our personas, our projections, our comfortable unconsciousness. They're not character flaws, they're psychological survival mechanisms. And spiritual awakening, it strips them all away. Not gently, not with love and light, but with the kind of brutality that makes people literally lose contact with ordinary reality. Your psyche doesn't want you to wake up. It wants you to survive, and it will fight your awakening with weapons you don't even know you're carrying. Jung identified 3 specific ways the psyche destroys people during awakening. 3 psychological landmines that detonate the moment you get too close to truth. Unless you know exactly what they are and how they work, you won't survive what's coming. The first one has already started. You just don't recognize it yet because it's disguised as spiritual progress. It's wearing the mask of your highest aspirations while secretly feeding on your psychological foundations. Jung saw this pattern destroy his most promising patients. The ones who seemed to be advancing fastest were often the ones falling hardest. You think you're becoming more spiritual. You're actually becoming more dangerous. Jung discovered something that shatters every spiritual teaching. The more light you claim, the darker your shadow grows. Not metaphorically, literally, psychologically, measurably. Every meditation, every spiritual practice, every attempt to raise your vibration, if you're not simultaneously descending into your shadow, you're not awakening. You're inflating. And inflation leads to explosion. Here's what's really happening in your psyche right now. All your life, you've pushed parts of yourself into the shadow. Your rage, unacceptable. Your selfishness, shameful. Your sexual darkness, terrifying. Your power, too dangerous. Even your joy, too vulnerable. You buried them so deep, you forgot they existed. Built a persona so convincing, you believed it was you. But Jung discovered something terrifying. The shadow doesn't just contain what you've rejected, it contains the opposite of everything you've claimed to be. If you've built an identity on being kind, your shadow contains cruelty. If you pride yourself on intelligence, your shadow holds your stupidity. If you're the responsible one, your shadow is pure chaos. Then awakening starts, and the shadow doesn't dissolve, it erupts. Jung watched a patient, a perfect spiritual teacher, never angry, always loving, meditated for hours. Then the dreams started. Violence, sexual deviance, murderous rage. She thought she was becoming evil. Jung told her the truth that destroyed her. You're not becoming evil. You're becoming whole. And wholeness includes everything you've rejected. She couldn't handle it. Doubled down on meditation, tried to pray away the shadow. 2 years later, complete functional collapse. Why? Because, and this will change how you see everything, the shadow isn't your enemy. Jung called it the seat of creativity. Every ounce of power you've disowned lives there. Every drop of authenticity you've rejected. Every spark of life force you've deemed unacceptable. Jung discovered this through his own shadow work. He found a figure he called Philemon, an ancient wise man living in his unconscious. But to reach Philemon, he first had to face what he called his murder fantasy. Violent images of killing, destruction, chaos. He didn't run, he painted them, wrote them, dialogued with them. And through that descent, he found not evil, but untapped creative force. Jung worked with him for 3 years to help him differentiate between the genuine spiritual content he'd received and his ego's inflation around it. Because now, you're not just unconscious, you're unconscious while believing you're awake. You're not just ego-identified, you're ego-identified with spiritual authority. You're not just asleep, you're teaching others to sleep while calling it awakening. Jung's exact words: the ego becomes inflated when it appropriates contents of the collective unconscious. Every time you think, I'm awakened and they're not, that's ego inflation. Every time you feel spiritually superior, ego inflation. Every time you believe you have the truth, ego inflation. The ego doesn't die during awakening. It evolves. It becomes a spiritual ego, more sophisticated, more deceptive, more dangerous. Jung saw patients who seemed to be progressing beautifully, then overnight, messianic complexes, convinced they were prophets, started gathering followers, built movements. 2-3 years later, complete collapse, lives destroyed. They required intensive support to return to functional reality. The telltale signs Jung identified: they stop questioning themselves. They become certain about everything. They can't tolerate criticism. They see signs and messages everywhere confirming their specialness. They believe their thoughts create reality. They think they've transcended human limitations. They feel called to save or awaken others. What happened? They confused the messenger with the message. They thought because divine content moved through them, they were divine. The ones who survive, they learn what Jung called relativizing the ego. The ego remains, but it knows its place. Servant, not master. Vessel, not source. Radio, not the signal. Jung's technique: constantly check your inflation. When you feel special, ask, what archetypal energy am I identifying with? When you feel chosen, ask, chosen by what part of my psyche? When you feel awakened, ask, what's still asleep? The ego needs constant monitoring during awakening, not destruction, conscious relationship. But this creates a new problem, because once your ego realizes it's not in control, once it accepts its demotion, you enter what Jung called the void. No old identity, no new identity, no solid ground. Just free fall through psychological space. Most people grab the first belief system they find, anything to stop the falling. That's how cults are born. That's how fundamentalism takes root. That's how spiritual awakening becomes spiritual imprisonment. They trade one ego structure for another, usually more rigid than what they left. But even if you avoid that trap, there's one more that breaks almost everyone. You survived the shadow eruption. You didn't let ego inflation destroy you. You think you've made it. Then you have to return to regular life. And this is what breaks most awakening souls. Jung called it the problem of the returned hero. In every myth, the hero descends, finds treasure, and returns to share it. But Jung noticed something the myths don't emphasize. The tribe usually tries to kill the hero, not physically, psychologically. Because your awakening is a mirror reflecting everyone else's sleep, your authenticity reveals their masks, your depth exposes their surface, your reality threatens their illusions. They don't want you awake, they want you back asleep where you're safe, predictable, manageable. Jung watched his patients transform, then returned to families who systematically destroyed every gain, not maliciously, unconsciously, through guilt. You've changed. I don't recognize you. Through manipulation. I like the old you better. Through withdrawal. You think you're better than us now. He documented a woman, successful attorney, mother of two, who'd gone through profound individuation. She'd integrated her shadow, found her authentic self, developed real consciousness. When she returned to her family, they declared war, not openly, subtly. Her husband started having anxiety about her changes. Her children became clingy and demanding. Her parents questioned her mental health. Every dinner became a battleground of projections. Every conversation, an attempt to pull her back. Her husband would say, "Remember when you used to be fun?" Her mother would ask, "Are you sure you're okay? You seem different." Her friends would joke, "Look who thinks she's enlightened now." Every relationship becomes a battlefield. Stay awake and lose connection. Go back to sleep and lose yourself. Most people can't hold this tension. They either abandon everyone, becoming spiritual refugees, or they abandon their awakening, choosing belonging over truth. But here's what's really happening. Your awakening didn't just change you, it changed your frequency. You're literally vibrating at a different rate than the sleeping world. And that frequency dissonance causes actual psychological pain, not metaphorical pain. Real, somatic, psychological agony. Jung called this the participation mystique, the unconscious psychological fusion that binds families and groups. When you individuate, you break this fusion. And the group experiences your individuation as abandonment, betrayal, even death. They're not wrong. The you who participated in their unconscious fusion is dead. And they're mourning that death while attacking what's been born. Being around unconscious people after awakening feels like nails on a chalkboard inside your skull. Every false conversation, every surface interaction, every unconscious projection, it physically hurts. Jung experienced this personally. After his awakening, normal social interaction became torture. Not because he judged others, but because he could see what they couldn't. Every conversation required him to pretend blindness. Every relationship demanded he betray his sight. Jung wrote about attending dinner parties where he could see everyone's shadows projected onto each other. The host's repressed rage at his wife. The wife's unconscious seduction of the guest's projection of his mother onto the hostess. All invisible to them, blindingly obvious to him. He'd sit there watching unconscious dynamics play out like a psychological puppet show, unable to speak what he saw without destroying the entire social fabric. So the awakened withdraw, not from superiority, but from necessity. They can't unsee what they've seen. They can't unknow what they know. They can't pretend unconsciousness without destroying themselves. This is the ultimate test. Can you stay awake in a sleeping world? Can you maintain your truth surrounded by lies? Can you hold your frequency in a field of static? Jung's solution was radical. Selective participation. He learned to dose his exposure to unconscious environments. Short bursts with recovery time. strategic withdrawal when needed, creating what he called temenos, sacred spaces where consciousness could exist without compromise. His tower at Bollingen wasn't escape, it was psychological necessity. Most can't manage this balance. They either disappear completely, becoming hermits, addicts, or statistics. Or they create a spiritual persona, pretending awakening while secretly dying inside. The ones who survive. They learn what Jung called holding the tension of opposites, fully awake and fully engaged, completely conscious and compassionately present, seeing everything and judging nothing. They develop what Jung called the transcendent function, the ability to bridge worlds without being torn apart by their differences. They become translators between dimensions of consciousness, not explaining their awakening, that's impossible, but embodying it in ways that slowly, gently create space for others to begin their own journey. Here's Jung's most devastating truth. Awakening isn't an event, it's a lifestyle of dying. Every day something else you thought was true dies. Every week another identity collapses. Every month a deeper shadow emerges. Every year a new ego structure needs dismantling. Jung was still dying to himself in his 80s, still discovering shadows, still deflating inflations, still integrating new depths. He had a dream near death where he was a student again, ignorant, seeking, beginning. After decades as Carl Jung, the master psychologist, his unconscious said, "You know nothing." This is the price of consciousness, eternal beginner's mind, forever dying, forever being born, forever discovering you're not who you thought. Most people can't take it. They want to arrive somewhere stable, to finally get it, to be done. Jung wrote about a patient who had been in analysis for 7 years, made incredible progress, integrated massive shadows, developed real consciousness. Then one day she said, "When does it end? When am I healed?" Jung's response destroyed and liberated her. Never. The unconscious is infinite. You're exploring infinity. How do you complete infinity? But consciousness isn't a destination. It's an infinite spiral. How do you complete infinity? The ones who survive spiritual awakening, they fall in love with dying, not morbidly, consciously. They realize every death is a birth, every ending a beginning, every loss a revelation. Jung discovered this produces a specific psychological state, what he called the union of opposites. Not choosing light over dark, but containing both. Not picking consciousness over unconsciousness, but bridging them. Not selecting spirit over matter, but marrying them. This isn't a concept. It's a lived experience that restructures your entire psyche. The you that started the journey, that person doesn't survive, can't survive, wasn't meant to survive. What emerges is something else. Not better, not higher, not more spiritual, more real, more whole, more consciously human. Jung called it individuation, becoming who you always were before the world told you who to be. Not transcending your humanity, but finally, fully, consciously inhabiting it. This isn't the awakening sold in spiritual marketplaces. It's not bliss. It's conscious suffering. It's not peace. It's conscious tension. It's not arrival. It's conscious journey. Jung's personal formula, discovered through his own descent. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But he added something most miss, and that true self includes everything you're not. The murderer and the saint, the genius and the fool, the god and the animal, all of it consciously integrated into one impossible, paradoxical, authentic self.